Well, we're back on Bring It Home, where we take the concepts of Homeland Security and national security and bring it home to you. And today we're going to talk about an interesting question. What is strategy? Now, a lot of people go immediately to definitions, and a good place to look is with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, because they have a great publication, a DoD publication, that gives a lot of definitions like this. And they start with the concept of strategy by describing it as developing and employing instruments of national power. And what essentially I mean by that is everything that a nation has in its resources, its people, its forests, its natural resources, and so forth. And then applying them in a synchronized and integrated way to achieve what you want to, both in a region like a theater or at the national or even international, multinational level. That's what the Joint Chiefs of Staff calls strategy. Below that, that's the general term. Below that is the concept of national strategy, and that is, what does a nation actually do? And the idea that they try to deliver is that a nation will develop and employ diplomatic, informational, economic, and military power. In other words, they break a nation's power into these four areas. And then they may be applied in different ways in different circumstances. The terminology they use, the term they use is DIME for diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. And some circumstances will require for primarily military power, D-I-M-E. Some will call more for diplomacy and information, D-I, and small military E, M and E. That's national strategy. Below that, the Joint Staff talks about military strategy, which is employing the armed forces of a nation to secure objectives. Political science takes a little different turn from these definitions. And when they talk about what is strategy, traditionally political scientists say it's art and science of balancing ends and means. And this is the common terminology that's used in the field of national security studies, balancing ends and means. The question is, how would you actually do that? What does that mean? I want to bring my enemy to bay and I have to balance that end with the means I have available. How do you actually balance them? That's a serious problem. How do you actually convert this into operations? Well, one way to think about this is with an example, and the greatest example I can think of is the Cold War, because it was literally a world war, but was fought mostly without military power, only with threat of military power. The strategy on the Western side was one of containment, crafted in the 1948-49 time period. And their fundamental idea, strategic concept was this: communism is at odds with human nature, and it can redistribute very efficiently, but it doesn't produce. So in the West, although redistribution may not be completely fair, you're producing more material. The concept then was, if we cut off communism from new resources, if we require it only to distribute but not be able to produce, then it will collapse. So you can see what the strategy was in the Cold War, then. It was a strategy of cause and effect. And I think this is a much better, cleaner way to approach strategy than this issue of balancing ends and means from a conceptual perspective. So I'm going to suggest to you a new approach, a new concept, a way to think about strategy. Strategy is a concept of cause and effect, a concept of cause and effect that will produce victory from a thinking enemy over time. Now let's talk about those other components. The core of it is the cause and effect relationship. If we do X against an enemy, a thinking enemy, over time, then we'll achieve Y. That's the core of strategy. Beyond that, we have to ask the question, what do we mean by victory? What constitutes success? And a lot of people think it means getting whatever you want. I'm going to suggest to you it means getting what you're willing to accept at a price you're willing to pay. You never get what you want, which is for the enemy to surrender everything freely. That's not going to happen. So what are you willing to pay, and then where will you draw the line? What are you willing to accept? Once you've decided that, you have a concept of victory. Beyond that, you need to consider the enemy himself. And frequently people disregard that. It's amazing, but they'll write a strategy without even thinking about the enemy. But you must, because the enemy's not like a hurricane or a tornado. The enemy is thinking, and he's as smart as you are. He's as dedicated as you are, and he's trying to unwrap what you're doing and trying to oppose you at every turn. You must consider him, and you must consider time. Time is important because winning over time is what really matters. It's not a victory today. It's a victory in the long run. And so strategy at its most basic is a concept of cause and effect that will produce what you're willing to accept at a price you're willing to pay from a thinking enemy over time. If strategy is obtaining victory, then how do you operationalize strategy? How do you put it into effect? That's where this concept of balancing ends and means comes in. And so in the Cold War, we know what we wanted to achieve, the end of communism, and we knew what essentially the cause and effect relationship was, that we were going to try to cut off their resources, prevent them from producing, and then let sort of nature take its course and let it collapse. But we had to operationalize that, and that meant balancing ends and means. Do we want more carriers or more tanks? More airplanes or more ground forces? Should we spend more on Peace Corps instead of on the military? Should we invest in diplomacy? Should we spend more on our own education and try to develop more scientists? This is the core argument about how strategy is maintained on a day-to-day basis. And what I'd suggest is that during the Cold War, we got to thinking entirely in those terms. How are we going to spend our money? And have come to think of that entirely as strategy. And what I'm suggesting to you today is that that is not, in fact, the case. That a better way to think about strategy is a matter of trying to bring to bear a cause and effect relationship that will bring you victory, something you're willing to accept from a thinking enemy over time at a price that you're willing to pay. Thanks for being with us on Bring It Home, and we hope you'll stay with us for more.